Hey guys, hope you're well. It's Tim Hills here from Hills Media House. In this video today, I'm going to be talking about why I sold my A7S II after owning it for less than a month. And I'm also going to explain what camera I'm looking at and what camera I'm ready to pull the trigger on. And it's not Sony. You're probably thinking, why would I sell the camera? Why would I sell the Sony A7S II after owning it for less than a month? Now, there's a few reasons, and I'll explain in this video what they are. First, I'll talk about why I was looking at the A7S II in the first place, and also 9 things that I quickly realized when owning the A7S II. Now, I don't have the camera here, I don't have the A7S Mark II here, because I did sell the camera. Also, a quick disclaimer here that I have not been paid by any of the brands or companies to say anything about cameras or their cameras or any of that kind of thing. So, getting that out the way now. These are all based on just real world experiences and real world examples. So now with that out of the way, we'll get into the video. All right, first off, what you need to do is you need to put yourself in my shoes with like my eyes as to why I was looking at the A7S II as an option in the first place. So I'll explain a little bit into that now. I was and still am a user of the Micro Four Thirds systems. I do actually own 3 of the Lumix G85s. I bought the G85 as a budget friendly entry level kind of camera. To get into that kind of camera market with. I didn't want something that was in the mid to high range where I was blowing my budget on the body and getting cheap glass. I wanted something that I could still afford as a body and then still be able to throw some money into getting some good quality lenses. I still think this is the right thing to do in many cases. They say to marry your lenses and to date your cameras or date your camera bodies. I still think this is a great option unless the body that you go for has a limited range of lenses. And I'll go into that a little bit more further on in this video. With all this said though, there was one thing that was a bit of a pain point for me in using the Micro Four Thirds cameras, and it was something that I was aware of, but I went for it anyways, and it did do a really good job for like, it kind of surprised me, to be honest. And that was the dreaded low light. Now, like I said, I did know that low light was kind of a weak point or a pain point in some ways of the Micro Four Thirds cameras, but I thought, how bad can it really be? And to my surprise, it really wasn't that bad. It kind of, surprised me in certain ways that I was able to go out and still shoot low light band photography. I was able to go out and shoot low light conditions and venues and those kind of things. And it kept up and it still does, and it still does a great job. Yes, when you get to those higher levels, it does definitely make a bit of a grainy difference, but for Micro Four Thirds cameras and the size of the sensors that they offer, it really isn't that bad. Where I was starting to have some trouble though was in low light venue work where I needed to get details and it just wasn't sharp enough and it just wouldn't cut through enough without there being a lot of noise. So that was one of the reasons why I did go down that A7S II path, or leading down into that A7 kind of range, or that low light capability range. Right, now enough about all those comparison things and like the G85 talk and all that stuff. You guys are here to see the reasons why I wanted to get the A7S II, and then the reasons and kind of what I found out really quickly when I did own the A7S II that caused me to get rid of it within less than a month of owning it. Right, number 1 was it was full frame. So it meant that I could finally take that leap into that full frame world, which I was super excited about at the time, and I do definitely see how the full frame sensors are a lot better than the Micro Four Thirds sensors. Reason number 2 is Sony were reigned as like the king of low light. So that was what kind of made my ears prick up to like Sony and open my eyes to be like, Sony, 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 don't look anywhere else. Every other brand out there isn't good enough. It's Sony, Sony, Sony. And as I said, that's where my pain point was with low light. So I thought, okay, let's go down the Sony path. So I went down the Sony path. Reason number 3 was the price point of the A7S II. I picked it up for around about $1,500 secondhand with a lens. And when you compare that to the A7S III, which is definitely a bit better with the touchscreens and all those kind of things and a lot of other differences, it was like the A7S III was like a good $4,000 more, and that doesn't even include a lens. It opened up the range of lenses in a certain way. I would say that it's not quite a 50-50 split with like the E-mount lenses on Sony cameras and the Micro Four Thirds range that's out there. But being E-mount, it did definitely have a fair range of lenses. Yes, they were a little bit more costly, but that was something that I was willing to kind of handle and willing to cop because they were a quality glass, they were a quality lens. So that kind of didn't deter me too much from going down that path. All right, so with the good, there's got to be some bad, right? Well, with this range, with the Sony A7S2, it wasn't just bad, some of it was absolutely horrible. I absolutely hated it. So here are some of the things that I quickly realized and quickly found out in owning the A7S2. All right, number one, the menus. Sony, what were you thinking with the menus? It is the biggest mess. It made no sense at all. It was so confusing, so scattered. It was absolutely hopeless. Drove me nuts when trying to find something, when trying to do something, change a setting, forget it. Number two was the battery life. Now, I did read in some reviews that the battery life was going to be bad and that it wasn't the best battery life out there, and it was a drop even from the A7 Mark I or the A7, but I didn't think it was going to be that bad, but it was really bad. Like, I think I was pushing like 45 minutes in video sometimes, where with like the Lumix G85, I can get like kind of 90 minutes plus on a battery. So that was something that I knew about going into it, but I thought, how bad can it be? And it was bad. It is really bad. I had to buy like 6 extra batteries to do shoots. I did a shoot for about 4 or 5 hours, which was kind of a standard time for me to be out and about on a shoot, doing a venue shoot or an event shoot. And I would blitz through 4 or 5 batteries in that without even blinking an eye. So their battery life was shocking. Number 3 was the IBIS. The Sony A7S2 does have IBIS in it, but it says that it's like pretty good. It's pretty bad. Like, compared to the G85, yes, I know it's micro four thirds sensor versus full frame sensor, all that stuff, but it was still noticeably bad, and it was still noticeably enough on my projects to go in and have to do more digital stabilization and those kind of things, which took more time. And it was also something that I didn't really account for in the first few projects that I did. So thankfully I was able to salvage that footage, but going back to it, I was so used to using my G85 with that stabilization that I wouldn't have to use that digital stabilization as much, if at all. And it was definitely something that I did notice. So the IBIS in it wasn't as good. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. All right, number 4 is the autofocus. Everyone raves on about how good the autofocus is in the Sony range. Yes, it's good when it locks onto something. Now, I'm going to emphasize that. When it finds something to lock onto. I had so many problems with the autofocus, hunting and like focus breathing. And yes, I know that can be part of the lenses as well. But I was using like native Sony lenses, like the 85 1.4 and the Sigma 85 1.8, and it was still struggling. Like, it just, in low light environments and that kind of thing, even in some daylight environments, it just really, really struggled. I'm going to go back onto that topic with like why the focus breathing and that kind of the hunting was such a bad thing for me. It just really detracted from the image quality, and it really made no sense as to why I was doing it. I'd focus on an image and in the background it would be hunting or like kind of pumping, focus breathing kind of thing away, and it just wouldn't make any sense. Like, it was nothing to do with a low light situation. It happened in daylight situations as well. It was just something that was happening with the lenses or with the body or with something. But even, as I said, with the native lenses, with native Sony into a native Sony body, it still had these issues, and it just really detracted like the image quality for me. And it was a massive thing for me to not have that. And from coming from a Lumix range where, yes, the autofocus isn't super quick, super fast or anything like that, it didn't do this weird kind of focus breathing, like hunting thing. It's a little bit slower, but it made it look a little bit smoother. So that was one of the reasons, that was one of the big reasons I actually wanted to get rid of this camera. The Sony A7S2 megapixels is only 12 megapixels, so it's not the best camera in the world by any means. But the Lumix G85 isn't either, only boasting 16. So it's not much, it's 4 megapixels difference, but it was definitely noticeable. I noticed it drop, especially in low light environments. It would do this, especially in film as well. It would do this weird little kind of blocking thing, like a pixelated blocking thing, and it looked really bad. It really had trouble in low light, and the photos, like, if you get this camera for photos, forget it. Don't get it for photos. Seriously, forget it. Because the quality isn't there, the sharpness isn't there. It's just not a camera for photo at all. This also reminds me that when I was doing some photos with this camera, the actual shutter button had a little weird, like kind of spongy feel to it. So it didn't like press down or half press down and then bang away it goes. It was like a real spongy, springy feel. And also when you did press down on it, it kind of took like a few milliseconds or like half a second to actually capture the shot. Now, that usually wouldn't be too bad with certain situations, but for me, I was using it in, number one, low light situations, and number two, in a fast-paced environment where it was bands moving around and that kind of thing. So I was trying to capture the facial expressions and those kind of things, or someone hitting the drums or hitting the cymbals or that kind of thing, and I wanted to time things perfectly, or as perfect as I could get them, and this just wasn't able to fire in enough time for me to be able to grab that shot that I wanted, especially coming from the Lumix range where it was pretty instantaneous. Another reason that made me not really a fan of the A7S II was the weight and like the body size and all of those kind of things. It was just like, yes, okay, obviously it was going to be a little bit heavier and that kind of thing. Being full frame and the lenses were a little bit bigger and that kind of thing. I understood all that. But it was the actual way that it was like you'd hold the camera. It felt like whenever you wanted to take like a horizontal shot, it felt like it wanted to lean to a certain way. It wanted to lean to your left. So in doing that, it just kind of felt like you had to shoot everything in portrait mode. Like, it just made no sense to me. It just was really unbalanced, and the weight just went to one side, and it was really hard to do, like, especially with like their little grip that they offer on their cameras. It's so small and blocky and crap. Like, the worst thing ever, especially coming from a Lumix range, where you've got a fair bit to grip onto. It just made it so much harder to like do one-handed shots with. Even in portrait mode, it was hard to hold, like in portrait mode, in doing portrait photography or videos. The grip wasn't really enough to kind of hold on to. You felt like you were going to drop it at times. So when you're doing one-handed horizontal shots, it made it even harder because it did want to lean to that left-hand side. All right, another point that I didn't like about this camera, in fact, this was like a massive reason that I really wanted to get rid of this camera. It just made no sense, and thankfully for Sony users and people that wanted to stick with Sony, they did change this on the A7S III range. But what it is where the recording button is placed to record video. It's placed in this weird spot where when you put your finger on the shutter, in saying that, you can't even press the shutter to start recording your video. On the Lumix range, you can. So if you just go to take a photo kind of thing, but you're in movie mode, you can use the shutter to start your recording, which makes sense to me. And they do also offer another little recording button, but I always use the shutter. You couldn't do that on the Sony. You couldn't use the little shutter button. So that was really annoying for me. And then finding out that you had to use the record button that was in the most ridiculous little spot on the side where when you'd hold it, and their little grip is so small to hold onto as well, you just feel like you're going to drop the camera every time because it was right where the kind of bottom of your thumb is, and you had to kind of reach back in this weird little way to kind of press this button, especially when you're doing one-handed shooting or anything like that. Like two hands, probably not so bad, but when you're like going to put the camera up in the air or anything like that, you would, yeah, it would just be the biggest annoyance. Like, I don't know what Sony was thinking. It is absolutely shocking spot for it, but thankfully they did fix this in the Sony A7S III. One other thing to add as well is, I don't know what Sony was thinking with this, but why was there no touchscreen on the A7S II? Like, have they gone back to the dark ages or something? It felt like to me I was handling a dinosaur. The Lumix G85 had touchscreen. I use it for focus, I use it for the options, I use it for the menu, I use it for pretty much a lot of things. Like, and to make the transition over to something that didn't have touchscreen, to not have the focus, to not be able to do all those kind of things, it just like, why? What? Like, it just, yeah, why? Why? And the last point on this is, okay, Sony, you win for now, okay? Your low light capabilities were amazing. In fact, they were through the roof going from a Lumix G85 in the Micro Four Thirds range. I was shooting on a Lumix, on the G85, I was shooting at 6400 at 1.4 with the shutter at the 180 rule, and it was getting near on ridiculous to use the footage. It was pretty grainy and pretty crappy. Yeah, it was not too bad at 3200. I can go there and that's fine. But 6400 was another level. And then you go to like 1200, I think is another one on there. And that was like, you just forget it. But from going from the Lumix to the Sony range, incredible. Like, definitely noticed the difference. I was shooting at 10,000 ISO on the Sony at 1.4 or f4 or any of those kind of things, with the shutter at the 180 rule, and the images were just incredible still. Like, yeah, there was a tiny bit of noise getting introduced at 10,000 ISO, as there would be and as there kind of should be, I guess. But yeah, they definitely did stand out in that range. But one thing I have found out about the low light capabilities and the sensor of the Sony cameras is that they aren't the only ones using the Sony technology. So I'll explain a little bit more about that in the video as well, so just keep watching. Alright, so where to from here for me? I guess it's like, do I go back to Lumix? Do I go to Canon? Do I go to Sony again? Do I go to like some other brand out there? Where do I go from here? What kind of opened my eyes again was I subscribed to a channel on YouTube and a little notification came up a few days later after I'd subscribed to this channel, Mark Bennett's Camera Crisis. Go check him out, fantastic. He's such a good bloke in front of the lens, like he's just amazing. This is a nice little way of explaining things, and yeah, he's just really good to watch. So this really opened my eyes into what was actually out there in a range that I didn't really know about, and for a reasonable price as well. It wasn't much more expensive than the A7S2 at a lower price, and it was also less expensive than an A7S3 that did offer some absolutely incredible results, and in fact, it kind of kills the A7S3. Like, that's the whole reason I want to go for this camera. So keep watching, and you'll find out what that camera is. He was talking about the Lumix S5 and how they're full frame and how the price has dropped and all those kind of things. So yeah, they've dropped to a really reasonable price, and in seeing the S5, that made me realize that there was the S5, the S1, the S1H, the S1R, all those kind of things. So there was a whole different range out there that I didn't really even know about in the full frame and low light situation world. So if you haven't worked out already, I am actually thinking about going back to Lumix. So I think it's because the menus make sense, to be honest. No, I guess I'm just a big fanboy of the Lumix range and how they feel, how they look, how their menus are, seriously how the menus are, and the quality of what they put out. So I'll explain about that kind of camera and about what Lumix offer in that as well. Alright, so first up, the first thing that I wanted to get in the Lumix camera, or any other camera for that matter, was to keep the low light technology or the low light capabilities there or on par with the A7S2, preferably better than that. And the Lumix S5, S1s, all that range have actually got that in a full frame. They have adapted to the Sony technology. It's not the Sony technology, but it is very, very similar, and they are providing incredible results. In fact, going on par to par from some of the reviews that I've seen, going from image to image, sorry, on some of the reviews that I've seen, the Lumix range absolutely crushes, like literally crushes the Sony A7 III. Like there's not even, you can't even compare the two when it gets to kind of 10,000, 12,000 ISO. Now I know that is high, but that is in some cases where I need to be. So I am obviously going to buy what is going to work for me in a low light situation. So now I'll go into what Lumix camera I am actually looking at getting out of that range. So as I mentioned, there was the S5, the S1, the S1R, and the S1H. And the one that I am looking at getting is the S1, just the S1, not the S1H or the S1R. Now the S1 offers pretty much the same features as the S5, minus a few like nitty gritty details, which do make a difference, but I won't go into them for time reasons. Yes, the body is a little bit bigger and the rear screen is a little larger. It still hosts 24.2 megapixels, which is still great for the hybrid shooter like myself. Plus it has 96 megapixels in a high res mode, so you can get super crisp images. What it does is it takes a photo, a quick photo to begin with, and then it does 8 really quick photos after that, compresses them together, gets this fantastic image. So it also has unlimited recording times in 4K. And has internal 6K and 5.9K, but the 6K and the 5.9K are limited to 15 minutes, where the 4K is unlimited time. Now, a little bit of a downside on the S1 range and the S5 range is that they have an L mount for their lenses, so it's a Leica mount for their lenses. This is, yeah, as I say, a bit of a downfall because it does kind of block you into a few lenses that you can get, but it's not always, like I say, it's not always a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing because camera brands and lens brands like Sigma have created lenses that have the L mount on them now, so they have opened the doors up for a little bit more option. Panasonic have now jumped on board as well, so it's not just Leica lenses. They are a little bit more expensive, but they are really, really, really good quality lenses. So you do get what you pay for in that range. But yeah, and prices are kind of getting a bit more competitive there now that a few more companies have entered that L mount kind of market there. So another thing too is there is a handful of adapters that you can get out there for the L mount lenses. I know that you can get the Canon EF mount adapter for it, so you can use some of your Canon lenses, so that's always a plus there. But I do think that does disable some of the like autofocus kind of things on there. So just kind of, if you're looking down that option, just do a little bit more research. So to sum this up, I've given Sony the boot, and I'm giving them the boot for now, for as long as it takes for them to create something that is way better than the S range in the Lumix range, and the S5 range for that matter, or in saying that as well, something that tops the A7S Mark III, and not only in what it offers, but also in price. I can understand if it starts to shoot 10K and all this kind of fancy nitty gritty details and stuff, and it comes in at like 6 or 7 grand. Okay, I can kind of stomach that from going from a 5 grand camera. But if they start listing prices like 6 grand or 7 grand on a body that offers 6K or something like that, where it's not a massive leap, it's not enough for me to stomach that. So I'll be sticking to Lumix, but that is where I am with Sony at the moment, and other camera brands as well. So I am definitely heading down the Lumix range and ready to pull the trigger on that purchase. Now, another reason why I'm looking at going down the Lumix path as opposed to the Sony A7S3 path is because the Sony A7S3 only offers 12 megapixels, or it's like 12.1 or something like that, where the Lumix S1 offers 24.2, which is obviously going to benefit me for hybrid shooting modes. So the 12.1 or whatever it is in the S3 just isn't going to cut it for image quality for me for pictures, and also with what I've used for 12 megapixels in the S2, like, no, it just doesn't cut it in video or photo. It just doesn't work. Now, I do also know that the A7 III, not the A7S3, that offers 24.2 megapixels, but the reason I'm not going down that path is for all the reasons that I've just stated, like the menu, the autofocus, the breathing thing, the layout of it, the balance, all that kind of thing. Just, I don't even want to go near it. So I know that is an option out there, but I don't want to go near that. And for other reasons as well, like the battery life isn't as good. There's a whole range of reasons that I can list out. But yeah, I would love to know what you guys think as well, though. If you guys think A7 III or A7S3 or any other camera out there, let me know in the comments below. Let me know. So I'll wrap this video up here. Thank you guys so much for watching this. If you liked this video or you liked any of my other videos, go and check them out if you haven't seen them. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. It's really appreciated. And yeah, as always, guys, thanks for joining me in this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.